The light from the crystal chandelier was dazzling, but it couldn't hide the storm brewing underneath. My name is Eleanor Vance. I'm 28, and I was standing in the middle of my grandmother's birthday party, completely trapped in a conspiracy I was just beginning to understand. It was all happening in this huge, historic mansion in Charleston, surrounded by the scent of old money and forced smiles. My parents were masters of the act, their laughter perfectly pitched, their glasses clinking with practiced ease. Then my grandmother, Margaret, a woman whose delicate frame housed a will of iron, lifted her champagne flute. Her eyes, sharp and knowing, found mine across the room. "Are you enjoying the company shares I left for you, my dear?" she asked. Her voice was quiet, but it sliced through the polite chatter like a razor. I froze, my fork hovering halfway to my lips. "Which company?" I managed to get out, the words feeling foreign in my own mouth. The entire table fell dead silent. My mother's champagne flute hit the table with a sharp clink, her hand trembling so hard a few drops of gold spilled onto the white linen. My father's jaw went rigid, his eyes darting to her in a flash of pure panic. My cousin Leo, who was usually the picture of smug confidence, was suddenly fascinated by the pattern on his dinner plate. It felt like the whole world had stopped breathing, every single guest waiting for the other shoe to drop. My grandmother placed her glass down with deliberate, agonizing slowness. Her smile was cold, all-knowing. "You will understand soon enough," she said, but her gaze was fixed like a laser on my parents. My stomach twisted into a painful knot. This wasn't just some offhand question. It was a lit match, held over a trail of gasoline that led directly to a truth I had never, ever seen coming. Their perfect, polished performance, a role they'd played for years, was starting to crack right there under the glittering chandeliers. I knew, with absolute certainty, that this night was going to change everything. I just didn't know how. The answer was hanging right there in the tense, silent air, just beyond my grasp, and I had to know what it was. Ever had a family secret completely flip your world on its head? Let me know about it in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories. My grandmother's phone call was still echoing in my head. That was 2 weeks before the disastrous birthday party, back when I was just Eleanor Vance, a 28-year-old barely making ends meet in Charleston, South Carolina. My life was a constant hustle. I worked as a marketing assistant at Sterling Enterprises, the tech startup my grandmother had single-handedly built into an industry titan. My salary was just enough to cover the rent on my tiny, cramped apartment, but the payment was almost always late, and my refrigerator was a sad graveyard of instant ramen packets. I didn't complain, though. The struggle was mine, and the small life I had built was something I was proud of. My parents, however, had a very different definition of success. They loved to show off their new life. Their immaculate townhouse in one of Charleston's most exclusive neighborhoods, supposedly purchased after some vaguely defined investment paid off, screamed new money. During our obligatory Sunday dinners, they would go on and on about their latest cruise through the Caribbean or my dad's brand new Mercedes, their voices dripping with a kind of self-satisfied superiority. "Eleanor, you could have so much more if you just applied yourself," my mother would say, her smile as sharp and thin as a paper cut. My father would always nod in agreement. "You're nearly 30, sweetheart. It's time to grow up." Their words were like tiny daggers, but I'd learned to just bite my tongue and nod. They would never understand my quiet dedication or my desire to make it on my own. My grandmother Margaret was the complete opposite. She had founded Sterling Enterprises with nothing but pure grit, turning a small idea into a tech powerhouse. Even now, in her late 70s, she could walk into a boardroom and command the attention of everyone in it. She had always seen something in me that my parents missed. She'd slip me a $100 bill when I was in college, whispering, "You're so much more than they think you are." A few months back, she'd pulled me aside at a family barbecue, placing a firm, reassuring hand on my shoulder. "I left something in your name, my dear," she'd said. Your parents will know all the details." At the time, I figured she meant a small family heirloom or maybe some sentimental keepsake, not something that could alter the course of my life. She had trusted my father to handle it, and it never even occurred to me to question that. But her phone call changed all of that. I was in my tiny kitchen nuking a bowl of ramen for dinner when my phone buzzed. Her voice came through steady and warm. "Eleanor, have you had a chance to look at the gift I arranged for you?" she asked. I frowned, stirring the limp noodles with my fork. "The gift? I thought you were talking about, I don't know, a piece of advice or something." The pause on her end of the line was heavy, as if she was processing an answer she truly hadn't expected. "Your father was supposed to explain everything," she said, and for the first time, I heard a slight edge creep into her voice. "Ask him." The call ended just like that, leaving me staring at my cracked kitchen counter with a cold, curling dread in my stomach. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was deeply wrong. My dad, handling something important for me? It just didn't track. He'd always dismissed my ambitions as a silly hobby, calling my late nights at Sterling Enterprises playing office. My mother was even worse, constantly comparing me to my cousin Leo, who had recently been bragging about some major business deal at a family lunch. His smug grin and vague talk about opportunities had rubbed me the wrong way, but I just brushed it off as typical Leo bravado. Now it felt less like bragging and more like a clue. The next day, I unloaded everything on Chloe, my best friend who worked in the accounting department at Sterling. We were at our usual spot, a little diner near the downtown office, just a 10-minute drive from my apartment. Chloe leaned in, her eyes narrowing as I told her about my grandmother's call. "That's really weird," she said thoughtfully, stirring her latte. "Your grandmother owns a huge piece of this company. If she left you something, it's almost certainly shares. And if it's shares, it has to be recorded in the ownership logs. Have you checked your work email for any official notices?" Her words were like a jolt of electricity. Of course. I worked in marketing. I was so far removed from the financial side of the company that I'd never think to look in the corporate records. Chloe's suggestion lodged itself in my mind. My parents' sudden wealth, Leo's cryptic swagger, and my grandmother's mysterious phone call. The pieces didn't fit. I had always trusted my parents, even when their criticisms felt cruel. But the idea that they would deliberately hide something from me, something significant, started to eat away at me. Leo's deal felt connected, a missing piece of the puzzle I couldn't quite place. I drove home that evening in my beat-up old sedan, the moss-draped oak trees of Charleston blurring past my window as I replayed my grandmother's words over and over. Why hadn't Dad said a single word? What was this gift? Back in my apartment, I opened my laptop and stared at the Sterling Enterprises email login screen. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, a wave of hesitation washing over me. If I started digging into this, there was no going back. But the gnawing unease was far louder than my fear. I needed answers, and I had a terrible feeling that my inbox was about to blow my entire world apart. That email was about to unravel everything. That evening, an email from work did just that. I was sprawled on my worn-out couch, my laptop balanced on my knees, when the notification from Sterling Enterprises popped up. The subject line was Ownership Transfer Update, and my heart did a little flip-flop. I clicked on it, half expecting some boring, routine, company-wide announcement. But the words that appeared on the screen hit me like a physical blow. It was an official document, a log of recent share transfers, and my name was nowhere on it. My grandmother's words from her phone call echoed in my head, a gift in my name. If this document was related to that gift, then where was I? I called Chloe first thing the next morning, my voice tight with anxiety as I described the email. We met up at a quiet cafe near the office, a short drive from my apartment in Charleston. My best friend leaned forward, her brow furrowed in concentration. "That definitely sounds like an ownership log," she said, pushing her glasses up the bridge of her nose. Those emails track all the movements of company shares. Since you're in marketing, you wouldn't normally be on that distribution list. If your grandmother meant for you to have shares, they would have to be listed under your name, unless someone moved them. Her words landed with a heavy thud, and I gripped my coffee mug so tightly my knuckles turned white. "Is there any way to check that?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. She nodded. "It's not really my area of expertise, but Ben in IT could probably dig into the system's back end. He's a wizard with locked files and server logs." I found Ben later that day at the Sterling Enterprises office. His corner of the IT department was a chaotic nest of tangled wires, spare monitors, and half-empty coffee cups, but he greeted me with an easy grin. "Ownership logs, huh? Those are tricky," he said, already cracking his knuckles and typing away, "but I can probably pull the raw transfer data from the server." A few hours later, he called me over to his desk. His monitor was glowing with lines of code and numbers that made my head spin. "Here's the transfer," he said, pointing to a highlighted section on the screen. The shares, which were originally designated for me, Eleanor Vance, had been rerouted. They'd been moved to an investment fund called Harborfront Capital. My stomach plummeted when I saw the name of the fund's manager, my father, Robert Vance. Dad had taken what was mine, and my grandmother had no idea. That evening, I drove to my parents' townhouse, the beautiful oak-lined streets of Charleston a complete blur. My mother answered the door, her smile perfectly practiced and in place. "Eleanor? What's this all about?" she asked, her tone already laced with impatience. I didn't waste a second. "The company shares, the ones Grandma left for me. Where are they?" Her face immediately tightened, and she crossed her arms defensively. "Don't you dare meddle in things you don't understand," she snapped, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. And before I could say another word, she slammed the door in my face, leaving me standing on their perfectly manicured porch, my pulse hammering in my ears. Her dismissal wasn't just cold, it was a solid brick wall, built to hide something. Back in my car, my hands were shaking as I scrolled through old text messages. Then I saw it. A text from my cousin Leo, sent weeks ago right after a family lunch. "Big opportunity with your dad," it read, followed by a winking emoji. I'd completely ignored it at the time, chalking it up to his usual arrogant posturing. But now, it was like a flashing neon sign. Leo wasn't just boasting, he was in on it. Had Dad actually pulled him into this scheme? The thought twisted in my gut, a nauseating mix of white-hot anger and sheer disbelief. My parents had always been obsessed with their public image, but this was different. Taking what my grandmother had intended for me felt like a deliberate, calculated betrayal, a knife in the back. I couldn't just leave it at that. The email, my mother's harsh deflection, and Leo's smug text message, they were all pieces of a puzzle I was only beginning to solve. My job in marketing had kept me so far from the company's financial core that I'd never thought to question the ownership logs before. But now, I saw just how little I actually knew about the inner workings of Sterling Enterprises and how much my parents had been counting on my ignorance. The data Ben found was a start, but I needed more. I sent a quick text to Chloe, asking if she knew anyone in the legal department who might be able to help. If my father had moved those shares, there had to be a paper trail. The drive home was silent, but my mind was screaming. I had trusted my family even when their little jabs and criticisms hurt. Now, that trust was turning to ash. My cousin's text, my mother's sharp words, the official email, these weren't just a series of unfortunate coincidences. They were hiding something from me, and I was done waiting for them to give me the answers. I had to confront this head on. The next day, I took the elevator to the executive floor of the Sterling Enterprises building. The tower rose high over Charleston's historic district, its modern glass facade hiding secrets I was now determined to drag into the light. My heart was pounding as I stepped out onto the top floor, where the scent of money and power hung in the air amidst the polished wood and soft, recessed lighting. I wasn't here for a marketing meeting. I was here for answers. My cousin Leo's cryptic text and my mother's cold dismissal had lit a fire in me, and the email about the share transfer was the fuel. I had to find out exactly what my parents had done. I found Helen, my grandmother's longtime executive assistant, at her large desk just outside the CEO's office. Her graying hair was pulled back in an immaculate bun, and her eyes were sharp and intelligent behind wire-rimmed glasses. She had been with my grandmother since Sterling Enterprises was just a dream sketched out on a napkin, and her loyalty was absolute. "Eleanor," she said, her voice warm but with an undercurrent of caution, "what brings you all the way up here?" I hesitated for only a second, then I laid it all out for her. The phone call from my grandmother about a gift, the suspicious email, the missing shares. As I spoke, her expression slowly shifted, a flicker of suspicion crossing her features. "Your grandmother was under the impression you had already received those shares," she said, leaning a little closer and lowering her voice. "She assumed you were already getting involved in the management side of things." My breath caught in my throat. Management? "Helen, I'm barely scraping by in the marketing department." Helen pressed her lips into a thin, hard line and glanced towards my grandmother's closed office door. "Your parents were supposed to handle the transfer," she said, her tone clipped and precise. "I've had my doubts about them for years." With a sense of purpose, she stood up, walked over to a locked filing cabinet, and pulled out a thick folder. "You need to see this," she said, sliding it across the polished surface of her desk. The pages inside were covered in official-looking seals and legal jargon. It was a detailed record of a share transfer from my grandmother's estate directly to me. But there, on the authorization line, was my father's signature, sprawled confidently across the page, redirecting the entirety of the shares to his personal fund, Harborfront Capital. I just stared at the document, my hands trembling. Dad had literally signed away my future, and my grandmother had no idea. The betrayal burned like acid in my chest, a raw, physical ache. Helen watched me, her gaze softening with something that looked like pity. "I didn't want to believe they would do something like this," she said quietly. "But I've overheard too many whispers between your parents and that fund of his." I nodded, but I barely heard her. My mind was racing. My father had spent my entire life preaching about the importance of family loyalty, yet here was his name, his signature, stealing my inheritance right out from under me. I had to get some air. I stepped out onto the small balcony adjoining the office. The Charleston skyline stretched out before me, a beautiful panorama of church steeples and rooftops, but all I could see was that damning signature. I pulled out my phone and dialed David Chen, my grandmother's corporate lawyer. I had only met him once at a company function, a distinguished silver-haired man who radiated calm authority. He answered on the second ring. "Eleanor? What's wrong?" he asked, his tone immediately sensing my urgency. I explained everything, the documents, the fund, the signature, my voice surprisingly steady despite the rage bubbling just beneath the surface. "Those shares were registered in your name," he confirmed, his tone turning grim. "Your father had power of attorney to execute the transfer, but the intent was clear. It was for you, not his fund. This is a severe breach of trust." I gripped the metal railing of the balcony, the cool steel a stark contrast to the heat flushing my face. Mr. Chen's words were like a hammer, shattering any last shred of doubt I might have had. My parents hadn't just kept a secret from me. They had stolen from me. I thanked him and hung up, my mind already zeroing in on my grandmother's upcoming birthday party. It was just a few days away. It was the perfect stage. My parents would be there, wearing their masks of polite society, and Leo would almost certainly be swaggering around, basking in his unearned gains. They thought they had gotten away with it. They thought I was still the naive, clueless girl they could dismiss with a wave of their hand. But they were wrong. Back in my apartment that night, I spread the copies of the documents Helen had given me across my small kitchen table, mapping out my plan. The party would be full of family, friends, and key executives from Sterling Enterprises. My grandmother deserved to know the truth, and I was going to make sure it came out in the open. This wasn't just about fighting for some shares anymore. This was about fighting for what was right. My anger was a powerful current, but I forced it down, channeling it into cold, hard focus. I would confront them in a place where they couldn't run, a place where their carefully constructed lies would unravel in front of everyone who mattered to them. I called Helen again, asking her to make extra copies of the documents for me to bring to the party. She agreed without a moment's hesitation, her voice firm. "Your grandmother built this company for people with integrity, Eleanor," she said. "Don't you let them take that away from you." Her words resonated deep within me, a powerful reminder of exactly what was at stake. I wasn't just facing my parents anymore. I was facing their greed, their entitlement, their absolute belief that I would stay silent and let them get away with it. They were about to find out just how wrong they were. As I packed the papers carefully into my bag, my resolve hardened into steel. The party was my battlefield. I could already picture their faces, my mother's forced calm, my father's stammered, pathetic excuses, my cousin's smug grin finally faltering. I would stay cool. I would let the evidence speak for itself, and I would watch their whole fraudulent world come crashing down. Justice wasn't just some abstract concept, it was my goal, and I was ready to claim it. The day before the party, Chloe and I met at a quiet coffee shop after work. It was a cozy little hole in the wall a few blocks from the Sterling building, and its warm, inviting lights felt like a world away from the storm that was brewing inside of me. I slid into the booth across from her, the manila folder Helen had given me feeling like it was burning a hole in my bag. "I've got the proof," I said, my voice low and steady as I pushed the documents across the table. My father signed away the shares my grandmother meant for me. Chloe's eyes went wide as she scanned the pages, her finger tracing the outline of his signature. "This is huge, Elle," she whispered, looking up at me. "This is undeniable. You can't let this go." I nodded, my jaw tight. The papers confirmed every one of my worst fears. My parents hadn't just forgotten to tell me something. They had actively stolen from me, and my grandmother was completely in the dark. Chloe leaned back in the booth, her expression a mix of soft sympathy and steely resolve. "You have to confront them," she said, her voice firm, "at the party, in front of everyone. Your grandmother deserves to know the truth, and you deserve what's rightfully yours." Her words were like a lifeline, pulling me back from the edge of the pure, chaotic anger that threatened to swallow me whole. She wasn't just my friend, she was my anchor, the one person who could keep me grounded when all I wanted to do was scream. Back at my apartment that night, I started digging through my laptop, searching for anything else I might have missed. And that's when I found it. It was an old email thread, buried under a pile of my cousin's usual chatty, pointless messages to the family. He had sent this one directly to my father months ago, with a bland subject line, "Business update." But the contents made my blood run cold. "Thanks for the heads up on the fund, Uncle Robert," it read. "That profit split is going to clear out my student loans in no time." My heart sank like a stone. My cousin Leo wasn't just a passive bystander. He knew about the share transfer, and he was actively benefiting from it. His mountain of debt was no family secret, but this was a backroom deal with my father, a deal that was funded with my inheritance. My fingers were shaking as I fired off a text to him. "What's this about you and Dad's fund? Did you know about my shares?" His reply came back almost instantly, and it was so infuriatingly casual. "Not your business, Elle. Stay out of it." That condescending little dodge was as good as a confession, and it ignited a fresh wave of fire inside me. His smug tone, the exact same one he used when he was bragging at family lunches, made my blood boil. He thought he could just brush me off, just like my mother had at the door, but I was done being pushed aside. The next morning, I called Helen, my voice steady despite the knot of anxiety tightening in my chest. "I need more evidence," I told her. "Anything that directly links my cousin to this." She didn't hesitate for a second. "Meet me at the office after hours," she said. "I have access to the internal payment logs." That evening, I drove back to the Sterling Enterprises building as the sun was setting, casting long shadows across the quiet Charleston streets. Helen was waiting for me in her office with a stack of fresh printouts. "These are transaction records from Harborfront Capital," she explained, pointing to a series of highlighted lines. "Your cousin has been receiving small but consistent payments from the fund. They started just a few days after the share transfer." The numbers stared back at me from the page, cold, black, and undeniable. My father had not only stolen from me, but he had looped my cousin into his scheme, using my grandmother's company to quietly pay off his debts. Helen's face was grim. "I've watched your parents sideline you for years," she said, her voice filled with a quiet anger. "But this crosses a line." Her unwavering support fueled my resolve. But as I drove home, a different kind of weight began to settle over me. My family was completely unraveling. My mother's coldness, my father's signature, my cousin's greed. I had grown up, in a way, idolizing them, always trying to win their approval despite their constant jabs. Now, the thought of confronting them all at my grandmother's party twisted my heart. Was exposing them going to destroy us for good? A part of me, a small, tired part, wanted to just walk away, to keep the peace, however fragile it was. But another part, the part that remembered my grandmother's unwavering faith in me, demanded justice. I spent the next few days meticulously refining my plan. The party was going to be at my grandmother's mansion, packed with family, friends, and the company's top executives. I would bring the documents, I would present the evidence, and I would let the truth do the rest. Helen had the copies ready, and I rehearsed my words over and over in my head, imagining my parents' faces when I finally called them out. Leo's smirk would finally vanish, and my mother's practiced smile would crack and fall away. But the image of my grandmother's reaction haunted me. Would she blame me for tearing the family apart? I tried to push the thought aside, focusing on the heavy folder in my bag. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about her and everything she had built. Late that night, I sat on my couch. The documents spread out before me like a map of betrayal. The anger was still there, a hot current under my skin, but now it was mingled with a deep sense of grief. I had spent so many years trying to prove myself to them, to show them I was more than the immature daughter they saw me as. And now I finally saw them for who they really were. People who would put their own greed above their child. My cousin was no better, trading loyalty for a quick and easy payout. Yet as I pictured the party, that small voice whispered again, "What comes next? A broken family. Maybe forever." I shook it off, my hand gripping the folder tighter. I wasn't just fighting for shares. I was fighting for the truth. And my grandmother deserved the truth. The party was my one and only chance to strike. The night of my grandmother's birthday arrived, and the air in her grand Charleston mansion was thick with unspoken tension. The place was buzzing with guests, family, friends, Sterling Enterprises executives, all mingling beneath the warm glow of the crystal chandeliers. I stood near the entrance to the dining room, the folder full of evidence tucked securely in my purse, my heart pounding against my ribs like a war drum. Every smile seemed like a mask, every laugh felt forced. My parents glided through the crowd with practiced ease, my mother's laugh a sharp, tinkling sound, my father's posture ramrod straight. My cousin Leo was holding court by the bar, his grin as smug and self-satisfied as ever. I gripped my champagne glass, the cool crystal a small anchor in the storm, bracing myself for what I was about to do. My grandmother Margaret made her entrance, her presence instantly commanding the room despite her age. She wore a simple but elegant tailored dress, her eyes sweeping over the crowd with a quiet, regal authority. As dinner began, she raised her champagne flute, and the low hum of chatter immediately faded. "So, Eleanor," she said, her gaze locking onto mine, "are you enjoying the shares I left for you?" The question landed with the force of a physical blow, just as it had in my mind 100 times. The table froze. A fork clattered softly against a plate. I took a deep breath, my voice coming out surprisingly clear and steady. "Which company?" I asked, mirroring my initial confusion, but now armed with the devastating truth. My mother's glass slipped from her fingers, shattering on the table with a piercing crash. Red wine splashed across her expensive dress like a stain of guilt, her face draining of all color. Dad coughed, a strangled, nervous sound. We were just protecting your future, Eleanor," he said, his words rushed and hollow. Guests exchanged uneasy glances, and the room began to crackle with a tense, electric energy. My grandmother's eyes narrowed, her flute still held aloft. "Well, perhaps it's time you explained," she said, her tone sharp enough to cut through the suffocating silence. I stepped forward, pulling the folder from my purse. "I can explain," I said, my voice carrying across the room. David Chen, my grandmother's lawyer, was standing nearby, his silver hair catching the light. I had asked him to be here, knowing his presence would lend undeniable weight to my claims. He gave me a slight nod and stepped up beside me. "These documents," he announced, holding up the papers Helen had given me, "show a transfer of shares that were intended for Eleanor. Her father's signature authorized their move to Harborfront Capital, a fund which he manages." A collective gasp went through the room, and murmurs rippled through the stunned guests. My father's face turned a blotchy red, his hands gripping the edge of the table. "It was a temporary move," he stammered, his eyes wide, "just to secure the company's position." My mother just stared down at her lap, utterly silent. I turned my attention to my cousin. His smirk was long gone, replaced by a nervous twitch in his eye. "You knew," I said, my voice low but firm, "your emails to Dad. The ones about profit splits to pay off your loans. You were part of this." His eyes darted to the floor, then back up to me, a flash of flailing defiance in them. "I needed the money," he muttered, his voice barely audible. "It wasn't personal." The pathetic admission hung in the air, raw and ugly. Guests began to shift uncomfortably in their seats, their whispers growing louder. My grandmother finally set her glass down, the clink echoing in the silent room. Her face was like stone, but her eyes burned with a cold fury I had never seen before. "You three," she said, her voice trembling with rage as she pointed at my mother, my father, and Leo. "You thought you could steal from my granddaughter? From my legacy?" She turned to my father. "I trusted you, Robert. I trusted you to handle her inheritance. You betrayed us both." Dad opened his mouth, but no sound came out. My mother reached for his arm, her face finally crumbling into tears. My cousin seemed to shrink in his seat, all of his arrogant bravado gone. My grandmother turned back to me, and her expression softened, though her resolve was absolute. "Eleanor," she said, her voice clear and strong, "those shares were meant for you to lead this company forward, and they still are." She faced the room, her voice commanding. "Effective immediately, I am transferring full control of a new, larger share allocation to Eleanor. As for you three," she glared at my parents and my cousin, "you are cut off. From me, from this family, and from Sterling Enterprises." The words landed like a judge's gavel. The guests sat in stunned silence, the air thick with the aftershock. My mother let out a choked sob, but my father just stared straight ahead, his face a complete blank. My cousin pushed his chair back, muttering something about it not being fair, but no one was listening. Mr. Chen stepped forward and handed me a new document. "This legally reinstates your shares," he said quietly, "on your grandmother's orders." I took it, my hand surprisingly steady despite the chaos erupting in my chest. This was justice, but it didn't feel like a victory. I looked at my grandmother and our eyes met. Hers were filled with a mixture of pride and profound pain. She had built this empire from nothing, and now she was entrusting its future to me. But the cost was immense. My family was fractured, perhaps beyond repair. My mother's tears, my father's silence, my cousin's pathetic excuses, they were strangers to me now. The whole room watched as I clutched the document, my resolve hardening. I had fought for the truth, and I had won. But the weight of that win pressed down on me. As the guests began to disperse, whispering about the fallout, I stood by my grandmother's side. She squeezed my hand, her grip surprisingly firm. "You're stronger than they are," she said softly. "Now lead." I nodded, but my mind was stuck on the wreckage. Years of family dinners, holidays, shared memories, all of it shattered in a single night. I had exposed their lies, but the truth hadn't set me free. It had just carved a new, lonely path, one that I would have to walk by myself. I had stepped into my new role, but the scars were already forming. The morning after the party, the mansion was eerily quiet. The grand dining room, which had been alive with chaos just hours before, now stood empty, its polished tables reflecting the soft morning light filtering through the tall windows. My parents and Leo had left without a single word. No apologies, no final glances. Their absence had carved a hollow space inside me, a strange mix of relief and a dull, lingering ache. I stood by the window, staring out at the sprawling gardens of my grandmother's Charleston estate, the new share documents feeling heavy in my hand. I had won, but the victory had a bitter, metallic taste. I wandered outside, drawn to the small, placid lake behind the mansion. The water rippled gently, framed by ancient oak trees draped in Spanish moss. My grandmother found me there, her steps soft on the damp grass. She was carrying a slim folder, her expression calm, but etched with an unspoken pain. "Eleanor," she said, sitting beside me on a cold stone bench, "power means very little if you lose yourself in the process of getting it." Her words landed softly but carried the immense weight of her years. She handed me the folder. Inside were new share certificates, freshly signed, granting me controlling interest in Sterling Enterprises. "These are yours," she said simply. "Lead with the strength I've always known you have." I traced the official seals on the papers, my fingers lingering over her elegant signature. The shares represented so much more than wealth. They embodied her trust, her faith, her entire legacy. But as I looked at her, at the new, deeper lines etched around her eyes, I was flooded with guilt. I had exposed my own family, torn them apart in the most public way possible. My mother's tears, my father's vacant stare, my cousin's muttered excuses, they haunted me. Had I been too harsh? Could I have handled it differently? Each question was a sharp jab against my resolve. My grandmother seemed to sense my turmoil. "You did what was right," she said, her voice firm. "They chose their path, Eleanor. You chose the truth." Her hand rested on mine, its warmth a steady, comforting presence. "You are not responsible for their choices." I nodded, but the weight didn't lift. I had spent my entire adult life seeking their approval, enduring their constant jabs about my immature choices and lack of ambition. Now they were gone, leaving me both free and irrevocably tethered to the wreckage. News of the scandal spread through Charleston like wildfire. The city's tight-knit business community buzzed with gossip. My parents' names, once respected, were now whispered with disdain. Their investment deals dried up, and invitations to elite galas suddenly stopped arriving. My dad's fund, Harborfront Capital, once a rising star, was now shunned by partners who were suddenly wary of his ethics. My mother, a woman who had thrived on social status, retreated completely from public view. Her absence from the charity boards she once chaired was noted in hushed, pitying tones. I learned all of this through colleagues at Sterling, each new rumor a painful reminder of the cost of truth. My cousin faced his own quiet reckoning. His dreams of a cushy, high-paying role at Sterling Enterprises had evaporated. My grandmother's decree ensured he would never set foot in the company again. I found out from a mutual friend that he had taken a low-paying job in another state, his debts still looming over him. A small part of me felt a pang of pity, remembering his empty boasts about big opportunities. But that pity quickly faded when I recalled his email to my dad, so casually trading my future for his own financial gain. He had made his choice, just as my parents had made theirs. Back in my small apartment, I spread the new share documents on the table, staring at the numbers that now defined my future. Sterling Enterprises was mine to steer, a chance to honor my grandmother's vision. Yet every time I closed my eyes, I saw my mother's crumpled face, my father's blank stare. Had I pushed too hard? Had publicly exposing them been cruel? The thought gnawed at me, a quiet, insidious voice asking if I had traded justice for vengeance. I tried to push it away, but it lingered, a shadow I couldn't seem to shake. I visited my grandmother again the following week, desperate for her clarity. We sat by the lake again, the water perfectly still beneath a heavy gray sky. "Do you ever regret standing up to people you loved?" I asked her softly. She gazed toward the horizon, her eyes distant. "Regret is a part of caring," she said, "but you did not destroy this family, Eleanor. They did. You are worthy of this. Don't let their guilt steal your victory from you." Her words were another lifeline, pulling me from the whirlpool of doubt. She had built an empire from nothing. She had faced battles of her own. If she believed in me, then I had to find a way to believe in myself. Driving home through Charleston's oak-lined streets, the city felt different. It felt like mine in a way it never had before. The shares gave me power, yes, but my grandmother's faith gave me a purpose. I would lead Sterling Enterprises not just for profit, but to prove to myself that I could rise above the pain. My family's choices had broken us apart, but they would not break me. Still, the ache of their absence followed me, a constant reminder that freedom always comes at a cost. I had my future, but the past was a ghost that walked beside me. Days later, I walked into the main office of Sterling Enterprises. The sleek glass doors parted for me, revealing the executive floor where I had once felt like a complete outsider. Now, I belonged. I crossed the polished marble hallway, the click of my heels echoing with a newfound purpose, and entered the corner office. My office. A massive polished desk gleamed under the soft ambient light, and on it sat a simple brass plaque engraved with my name, Eleanor Vance. I ran my fingers over the cool letters, a quiet, powerful thrill pulsing through me. This was no longer my grandmother's domain or my parents' battlefield. It was mine. I sank into the plush leather chair, the weight of the past week finally settling around me. The journey to this moment had been a raging storm. My grandmother's cryptic question at her party, the email that unraveled a lifetime of secrets, the documents that proved my own parents' deception. I had stood up to them, exposed their lies in front of everyone, and watched my family fracture into a million pieces. My cousin's greed, my mother's silence, my father's pathetic excuses, they had all crumbled under the bright, harsh light of the truth. Yet sitting here, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt transformed. The view from the floor-to-ceiling window stretched across Charleston's historic district, a tapestry of rooftops framed by ancient oaks. I had grown up in this city, tied to the Sterling name, but always chasing an approval I would never earn. My parents had seen me as a pawn, my cousin as a rival. But I had listened to my instincts, to something deeper and truer than their shallow expectations, and it had led me here. The shares my grandmother had entrusted to me were not just about power or money. They were proof that I could carve my own path. Trust your instincts over family ties, I thought to myself. That single lesson was etched into every painful step of this fight. Under my leadership, Sterling Enterprises began to shift. I met with the department heads, and my background in marketing guided bold new campaigns that started drawing in major clients. The company's stock began to climb, and the whispers about my parents' scandal slowly faded as our results spoke for themselves. Colleagues who had once dismissed me as the founder's quiet granddaughter now listened intently in meetings, their respectful nods a quiet acknowledgement of my new place. I poured every ounce of myself into the work. Late nights blurred into early mornings, and each decision felt like laying another brick in the foundation of the legacy I was now building. This wasn't about erasing the past, it was about claiming the future. Yet even as the company thrived, my thoughts would drift to what I had lost. My parents had never reached out, not once since the party. Their silence was a cold, gaping void. I'd heard through the grapevine that they had sold their townhouse and left Charleston, their reputations in tatters. My cousin was gone too, chasing jobs far from the city's judgment. I wondered if they hated me, if they saw me as the one who had torn our family apart. Guilt would creep in during quiet moments, whispering that I had been too harsh, too unforgiving. Had I fought for justice, or had I fought for pride? The question lingered, unanswered. I pushed back against it, focusing on the solid reality of the office around me. The plaque on my desk was a constant reminder, not of victory, but of choice. I had chosen truth over a twisted sense of loyalty to a family that had never truly seen me. My grandmother's words by the lake echoed in my mind. "You are worthy." She had believed in me even when I doubted myself, and that faith was what anchored me now. I wasn't just leading a company, I was proving that I could stand on my own. One evening, I stayed late reviewing a new acquisition contract. The office was silent, the city lights twinkling like a field of scattered diamonds beyond the window. I leaned back in my chair, my eyes catching the glint of the brass plaque again. It wasn't just a name, it was a declaration. I had spent years being defined by the Sterling legacy, by my family's expectations. Now I was free, not because I had won some battle, but because I had finally, completely chosen myself. Trust your instincts over family ties. It wasn't just a lesson, it was my truth, hard-earned and undeniable. This story, I realized, was never really about shares or scandals. It was about finding the strength in your own voice, even when using it costs you everything you thought was familiar. For anyone out there listening, the lesson is simple. Your instincts are your compass. They are truer than any bond that demands you make yourself smaller to exist within it. I had lost my family, yes, but in the wreckage, I had found myself. As I looked out over Charleston, the city no longer felt like a weight. It felt like home, and I belonged here, not as a Sterling heir, but as Eleanor, whole and unyielding. I ran my hand over the plaque one last time, my name, my own.